What if the people you ignore today hold the key to everything you've lost? Marcus Chen was about to discover that some debts can never be repaid with money. The rain hammered against the bulletproof windows of the Bentley as Marcus Chen scrolled through his phone, barely glancing at the blurred world outside. Another seven-figure deal closed. Another property acquired. Another day of building his empire while the rest of the world scrambled for scraps. At 42, Marcus had everything money could buy and nothing it couldn't. "Sir, there appears to be something blocking the gate," his driver, James, said hesitantly. Marcus looked up with irritation. Through the sheets of rain, he could make out two figures crumpled on the ground just outside the iron gates of his Beverly Hills estate. Homeless people, probably. This was the third time this month. "Call security. Have them removed," Marcus said coldly, returning to his phone. "Sir, I think they might be hurt. The elderly woman, she's not moving." Something in James's voice made Marcus look up again. The driver had been with him for 15 years and never questioned his orders. Marcus sighed and pressed the button to lower his window an inch, rain immediately spattering against his $1,000 suit. "Fine, 5 minutes. If they're gone by then, bonus for you. If not, you're finding a new employer." James pulled the car closer, and through the downpour Marcus could see them more clearly now. An old man, perhaps in his 70s, was hunched over a woman of similar age, his body shielding hers from the rain. His clothes were soaked through, plastered to his thin frame. The woman lay motionless on the wet pavement, her face pale as death. Marcus felt nothing. He'd built his fortune in real estate by demolishing old neighborhoods, by seeing people as obstacles rather than humans. Sentiment was expensive, and he couldn't afford it. But then the old man looked up, and their eyes met through the rain-streaked window. Marcus's heart stopped. Those eyes. He knew those eyes. Suddenly, he was 8 years old again, standing in a garage that smelled of motor oil and old coffee. He was holding a wrench too big for his small hands, and someone was teaching him how to change a tire, patient and kind, never once making him feel stupid for not knowing. "Mr. Patterson." The name escaped Marcus's lips in a whisper. He threw open the car door, stumbling into the rain, his expensive shoes splashing through puddles as he ran toward the gate. His fingers fumbled with his phone, entering the security code, and the gates began their slow swing open. "Mr. Patterson, Mrs. Patterson." Marcus dropped to his knees beside them, rain pouring down his face, mixing with something else he couldn't quite name. The old man's eyes widened with recognition, then filled with tears. "Marcus, little Marcus Chen. What happened? What are you doing here?" Marcus's hands shook as he checked Mrs. Patterson's pulse. It was there, faint but steady. We didn't know where else to go," Mr. Patterson said, his voice breaking. "We lost everything. The medical bills, they took the house, the garage, everything. Margaret, she collapsed while we were walking. I didn't know. I saw your gate and thought maybe." Marcus felt something crack inside his chest, something that had been frozen for decades. "James, call an ambulance. Now." He pulled off his jacket, the Armani he'd bought in Milan last month, and wrapped it around Mrs. Patterson's still form. Mr. Patterson tried to protest, but Marcus silenced him with a look. "Long have you been out here?" Marcus asked. 3 weeks on the streets. 2 months since we lost the house." Mr. Patterson's teeth chattered as he spoke. "Margaret needs medication for her heart. I've been trying to find work, but who wants to hire a 73-year-old mechanic?" The ambulance arrived within minutes, and Marcus insisted on riding with them to Cedars-Sinai, the best hospital in Los Angeles. He made calls as the paramedics worked on Mrs. Patterson, ensuring she'd have the finest care available. Money, which had meant everything to him an hour ago, now seemed like the only tool he had that mattered. Harsh fluorescent lights of the emergency room, Marcus finally got a good look at the man who had once meant the world to him. Mr. Patterson's hair, once thick and black, was now sparse and white. His hands, which had once moved with such confidence and skill, trembled with age and cold. But his eyes, those kind eyes that had seen a scared little boy and decided to care, they were the same. "I'm sorry," Marcus said suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "I'm so sorry, Mr." Patterson looked confused. "For what, son?" for forgetting you, for becoming this. Marcus gestured at himself, at his expensive watch, his designer clothes, the life he'd built on the graves of his humanity. You and Mrs. Patterson, you were the only ones who cared about me when Mom was working 3 jobs and Dad had left. You taught me everything. How to fix things, how to be honest, how to work hard. And when I made my first million, when I had the chance to find you, to thank you, I told myself I was too busy. I convinced myself that the past didn't matter. Tears were streaming down Marcus's face now, and he didn't bother to wipe them away. Every success I've had, it started in your garage. You gave me my first job, paid me when you could barely afford it yourself, taught me that I was worth something, and I repaid you by forgetting you existed. Mr. Patterson reached out with a shaking hand and gripped Marcus's shoulder. You were just a boy who needed to survive. I never expected anything back, Marcus. That's not why we helped you. That's exactly why I should have come back, Marcus said. Because you didn't expect it, because you helped me without wanting anything in return. That's what made it matter. A doctor emerged from the emergency room and Marcus jumped to his feet. Mrs. Patterson is stable, the doctor said. But she's severely dehydrated and malnourished. Her heart condition has been untreated for months. We'll need to keep her for at least a week, run some tests, adjust her medications. Whatever she needs, Marcus said immediately. Money is not an issue. I want the best cardiac specialist in the hospital on her case. Private room, everything. Doctor nodded and left, and Marcus turned back to Mr. Patterson, who was openly weeping now. You don't have to do this, the old man said. Yes, I do, Marcus replied. Not because I owe you, though I do, but because it's the right thing to do, something I should have learned from you but forgot along the way. Over the next week, as Mrs. Patterson recovered, Marcus learned the full story of their downfall. Mr. Patterson's garage, the small business that had been his pride for 40 years, had been in the path of a new development. The company that bought the land offered him a fraction of what it was worth. When he refused to sell, they found violations, real and invented, until the fines buried him. Then Mrs. Patterson's heart condition worsened, and the medical bills piled up faster than they could pay them. They lost the garage, then the house, then everything else. What was the name of the development company? Marcus asked one afternoon as they sat in Mrs. Patterson's hospital room. Mr. Patterson showed him the paperwork, and Marcus felt his blood run cold. It was one of his companies, one of his developments. He had signed off on the acquisition himself, never bothering to look at the names of the people being displaced. They were just numbers on a spreadsheet, obstacles to profit. He had destroyed the people who saved him, and he hadn't even known their names. Marcus excused himself and spent the next hour in his car, his head in his hands, sobbing like he hadn't since he was a child. What had he become? What monster had he turned into in his pursuit of success? When he finally composed himself, he made a decision. Over the following months, Marcus began to dismantle the life he'd built. He hired private investigators to track down every person his developments had displaced. There were hundreds of them, families who lost their homes, small business owners who lost their livelihoods, communities that had been scattered to the wind. He couldn't undo what he'd done, but he could try to make it right. He sold properties, liquidated assets, and created a foundation. Every person his company had wronged received compensation far beyond what they'd lost. He rebuilt Mr. Patterson's garage, bigger and better than before, and helped dozens of other small businesses get back on their feet. He established free medical clinics in the neighborhoods his developments had destroyed. His board of directors threatened to sue him. His fellow millionaires called him a fool. His social circle evaporated overnight. Marcus didn't care. For the first time in decades, he could sleep at night. Mr. and Mrs. Patterson moved into the guest house on his property, not because Marcus insisted, but because they wanted to. Mrs. Patterson's health improved with proper care and medication. Mr. Patterson reopened his garage, and Marcus found himself spending his evenings there, just like when he was 8 years old, learning not just about cars, but about life, about kindness, about what really mattered. You know, Mr. Patterson said one evening as they worked on restoring a classic Mustang, I always wondered what happened to that scared little boy who used to sweep my floors. I'm glad to see he's still in there, under all that expensive cologne." Marcus laughed, a real laugh that came from somewhere deep inside. He got lost for a while, had to collapse outside someone's gate in the rain to find his way back. "That's the thing about being lost," Mr. Patterson said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Sometimes you have to fall all the way down before you remember how to stand up right." Marcus's company never recovered its former glory. He'd made too many enemies, burned too many bridges in the name of redemption. But he didn't care. He built a smaller, more ethical business, one that developed properties without destroying lives. It was slower, less profitable, but it let him look at himself in the mirror. A year after that rainy night, Marcus stood at a podium before a crowd of journalists. He'd called a press conference, and the media assumed he was announcing his return to ruthless business practices. Instead, he told his story. He told them about Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, about the boy in the garage, about the people he'd hurt and the fortune he'd spent trying to make amends. "I stood at the top of the world and felt empty," Marcus said, his voice steady. "I had everything money could buy and nothing that mattered. It took seeing the people who once saved me collapsed in the rain outside my gate to realize that success without humanity isn't success at all. It's just expensive loneliness." Story went viral. Some praised him as a hero. Others condemned him as a hypocrite seeking redemption he didn't deserve. Marcus didn't read the comments. He'd learned that the only opinions that mattered were those of the people whose lives you touched directly. On a cool autumn evening, Marcus sat on the porch of his home, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Mr. and Mrs. Patterson sat beside him, Mrs. Patterson knitting, Mr. Patterson reading the newspaper, comfortable in the kind of silence that only exists between people who truly know each other. "You regret it?" Mrs. Patterson asked suddenly. "Giving up all that wealth, all that power?" Marcus thought about the question seriously. He thought about the penthouse apartments he'd sold, the private jets he'd given up, the exclusive clubs that had revoked his membership. Then he thought about the families who had homes again, the businesses that were thriving, the communities that had been rebuilt. He thought about being able to sleep at night. He thought about having friends who cared about him, not his bank account. He thought about Sunday dinners with the Pattersons, about working in the garage, about feeling connected to something larger than himself. "No," he said finally, "I don't regret a single dollar. The only thing I regret is how long it took me to remember what you taught me, that the measure of a life isn't what you accumulate but what you give away. That real wealth is measured in relationships, not bank accounts. That the most important thing you can do with privilege is use it to lift others up." Mrs. Patterson reached over and patted his hand, her touch light as a butterfly. "You always were a smart boy, just took you a little while to remember it." As the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt at peace. He felt like he belonged. He felt, finally, like he had come home. The gates to his estate, the gates that had almost closed on two desperate souls in the rain, now stood open during the day. Neighbors walked their dogs past them. Kids rode their bikes through them. His home, once a fortress of isolation, had become part of the community. Marcus had learned that the most expensive thing in the world isn't a mansion or a yacht or a private island. It's becoming so successful that you forget what made you human in the first place. And the most valuable thing you can do with a second chance is make sure you never forget again. The elderly couple who collapsed in the rain outside his gate hadn't come to take anything from him. They'd come to give him back something he'd lost, his soul. And that, Marcus understood now, was worth more than all the money in the world. Years later, when people asked Marcus Chen about the moment that changed his life, he never talked about his first million or his biggest deal. He talked about a rainy night, an iron gate, and two people who taught him that sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what truly matters. "The greatest irony," Marcus would say, "is that I spent my whole life building walls to keep people out, when what I really needed was to open the gates and let them in." Mr. Patterson's garage became a community center where Marcus taught young people about business, not the ruthless kind he'd practiced, but the kind that built things without destroying lives. Mrs. Patterson started a food bank in the neighborhood, feeding families who were struggling just as they once had. And Marcus, the millionaire who had once measured his worth in dollars, learned to measure it in smiles, in lives changed, in the warmth of human connection. He would never be as rich as he once was, not in monetary terms. But every night as he locked up the garage after a day of teaching and helping and building community, Marcus Chen knew he was the wealthiest man alive. Because he had found something more valuable than gold. He had found his way back to being true. Wealth isn't measured by what you own, but by who you lift up when you have the power to do so. Sometimes the people we overlook hold the key to our redemption, and it's never too late to choose humanity over fortune, connection over isolation, giving over taking. The gates we build to keep people out often imprison us inside, but it only takes one moment of choice to open them and be free.